We arrived at the hotel in the late afternoon. The long road, filled with the anticipation of rest, was finally behind us. The hotel looked like a true paradise on earth. White walls, tall columns, spacious balconies overlooking the sea. I could feel the fresh sea air wrapping around my face, carrying with it a promise of peace and relaxation. My parents were beaming with happiness, looking around as if they were already on their way to their well-deserved vacation. Dad, unable to hide his smile, gently stroked Mom's hand. He always loved moments like these, when we, as a family, could spend time together away from the hustle and bustle of daily life. However, it turned out the hotel was fully booked. Despite our reservations, there was an issue with the rooms. Jack and I were offered a shared room with a single large bed. Jack was my adopted brother, but we had always been very close. I felt a slight twinge of nervousness, but tried not to show it. After all, we're adults, and it's just a bed. "It's only for a few nights," Jack whispered as we entered the room. I nodded, trying to convince myself that it was not a big deal. After all, Jack and I had always been like brother and sister, even though he was adopted. But still, there was a subtle tension in the air. The room was cozy, soft colors, large windows letting in the sunlight. The bed stood right in the center, taking up most of the space. I glanced at Jack, who was looking out at the view. He seemed calm, as usual. I tried to follow his example, unpacked my things, and attempted to relax. When night fell, we both felt a bit uneasy. I lay on one side of the bed, Jack on the other. It felt strange. We weren't children sharing a bed like we used to, but we weren't strangers either. We just lay in silence, our bodies touching accidentally, but neither of us moved. At some point, I felt Jack shift slightly closer, almost as if by accident. I pretended not to notice, but inside, I felt tense. I felt his breath on my skin and unconsciously held my own. My thoughts raced, trying to explain to myself that this was just the result of the cramped bed and family closeness. Sleep eventually took over. We fell asleep in each other's arms, and I tried to convince myself that it was just a comfortable position. However, waking up in the middle of the night, I felt his arms still holding me tightly, our bodies too close together. I didn't know how to explain it to myself or to Jack. The morning began with an awkward moment. I was in the shower, enjoying the warm water, when the bathroom door suddenly opened. Turning around, I saw Jack standing frozen in the doorway. My heart instantly started beating faster. "Jack, what are you doing?" I shouted, grabbing a towel and throwing it in his direction. Jack looked embarrassed and confused. His eyes were wide, and he seemed to take a moment to realize what had happened. "Sorry, I didn't know you were in here," he mumbled, stepping back. "Get out now," I demanded, feeling my cheeks flush with heat. Jack quickly exited, closing the door behind him. I remained in the bathroom, feeling flustered and annoyed. My heart was still pounding too fast, and a strange feeling was growing in my chest. It was just a misunderstanding, an accident, but for some reason, it made me feel uncomfortable. When I came out of the bathroom, Jack was already in the room, trying to act as if nothing had happened. He glanced at me quickly, then looked away, pretending to be occupied with something else. I tried to act normal too, but the morning incident kept replaying in my mind. We spent the entire day on a tour with our parents. I tried to keep my distance from Jack, avoiding his gaze. But every time our eyes met, I noticed him looking at me with some new expression I couldn't quite decipher. Jack seemed to feel awkward too, though he didn't show it. We only spoke to each other when necessary, trying to maintain some distance. Yet, I could feel invisible sparks flying between us. His gaze had become oddly attentive, almost studying. And though I tried to focus on the tour, thoughts of what happened that morning wouldn't leave me. The glances we exchanged throughout the day spoke far more than any words. I felt a strange excitement every time our eyes met. It was hard to understand how to explain it, or why it affected me so much. In the evening, we had dinner with the family at the hotel restaurant. The atmosphere was cozy and pleasant. Dim lighting, soft music, and the light aroma of freshly prepared dishes. Mom and Dad were animatedly discussing plans for the next day, but I could hardly focus on the conversation. All day I had tried to act normal, but what had happened in the morning lingered in my mind. Jack sat across from me, and I could feel his occasional glances. I tried to ignore them, but it was harder than I thought. We both pretended that everything was fine, but the tension between us only grew. My heart seemed to beat faster every time Jack looked up and met my gaze. These moments of silence when neither of us spoke felt endless to me. Suddenly, Mom asked me something, and I startled, realizing I had been lost in my thoughts. "Are you okay, Emily?" she asked with mild concern. "Yes, I'm fine, just thinking," I smiled, trying to sound confident. But inside, I felt something was changing. Jack barely participated in the conversation, responding in short phrases, and it only heightened the sense of hidden tension between us. When dinner ended, we all headed back to our rooms. In the hallway, I felt Jack was closer to me than usual. His hand brushed against mine slightly, and I felt a strange thrill run through my skin. I tried to ignore it, convincing myself that everything was fine. When we returned to the room, the tension felt even more palpable. Jack seemed both anxious and thoughtful. He sat on the edge of the bed, looking like he wanted to say something but didn't dare. "Is everything okay?" I asked quietly. He looked at me with a new expression in his eyes, and I suddenly realized his feelings were becoming more apparent. "Yeah, I don't know how to explain it," he mumbled, not taking his eyes off me. I didn't know how to respond. We both felt that something more than just family closeness was happening between us, but neither of us dared to voice it. When we lay down in bed, I felt Jack slowly move closer. His hand gently touched my shoulder, and I felt something stir inside me. I turned toward him, our bodies touched, and I felt his warmth. Jack pulled me closer, and I instinctively responded with a synchronized movement of my hips. Our breaths became quicker. I felt his heart beating in unison with mine. The passion between us ignited, and at that moment, nothing else seemed to exist. But we tried to control our feelings, knowing how dangerous this game was. I felt Jack fighting with himself, trying to control his emotions. We knew we shouldn't cross the line, but with every second, it became harder to resist. We lay in silence, our bodies touching under the thin blanket, and it felt like time itself had stopped. I could feel Jack's breath becoming heavier. His hand gently slid across my waist and then stopped. He moved closer to me, his lips brushing against my neck. The moment was so overwhelming that I couldn't help but let out a soft sigh. His kisses were soft and light, but with each movement, I felt the passion growing within him. He gripped my hips, and I couldn't resist responding. My body succumbed to this forbidden desire, and I knew we were going too far, but I couldn't stop. Every touch felt so natural, so right in that moment. I felt his fingers gently touch my skin, his lips moving down my neck, towards my collarbone. His breath grew hotter, and my thoughts became increasingly tangled. I couldn't find the words to express what I felt. My heart beat in unison with his, and each movement made me forget about reality. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. We both froze, like a pair of frightened animals. My heart pounded so loudly that I feared Dad might hear it from the other side of the door. "Jack, Emily, are you asleep?" came Dad's voice. We exchanged a quick glance, full of anxiety and panic. Jack released me, and we hurried to compose ourselves, trying to appear as if we had been sleeping for a long time. I pulled the blanket over myself, and Jack turned to the other side, closing his eyes. "Yes, Dad, everything's fine," Jack replied, his voice tense, almost hoarse. We heard the door quietly open. Dad seemed to peek inside briefly and, convinced that everything was calm, closed the door and left. We lay still, listening to his footsteps fading away. When silence filled the room again, I felt the tension recede, but something else took its place. The realization of what had just happened. My gaze met Jack's, and I saw the same understanding in his eyes. We knew we had to stop, but we also knew that our feelings had already grown too deep. "We need to stop," I whispered, my voice trembling with emotion. "Yes," he quietly agreed, but his eyes were still full of desire. We tried to calm ourselves, but I knew these feelings wouldn't just disappear. We both understood that we had crossed a line, and there was no going back. Something had changed between us, something we could no longer ignore. The next day, we both tried to act as usual. I decided that the best way to maintain normalcy was to avoid any hints about what had happened the night before. I acted as if nothing had changed and hoped Jack would do the same. We were supposed to be brother and sister, nothing more. We went down for breakfast together, but we only talked about trivial things. Mom and Dad didn't notice anything strange, which was a relief. They continued discussing our plans for the day, to spend it on the beach, play volleyball, and just enjoy the sun. I agreed with the idea, hoping that an active day would help me distract myself and forget what had happened. We headed to the beach, taking everything we needed: a ball, towels, sunscreen. The sun's rays warmed my skin, and for a moment, it seemed like everything could really go back to normal. Jack also looked calm, even smiling. We started playing volleyball with our parents, which helped ease some of the tension. But soon, I noticed that Jack was looking at me more often. His glances were penetrating, and I could feel them even when he was on the other side of the court. I tried not to pay attention, but a growing unease settled inside me. After the game, we sat down to rest, and Jack approached me. "Emily, can we talk?" he asked quietly. I froze for a moment, realizing that this conversation was inevitable. "Of course," I replied, trying to keep calm. We moved away from our parents and began walking along the shore, where the waves gently lapped. The sand was warm, which calmed me a little, although I felt the tension building. "We need to talk about what happened," Jack began, his voice restrained, but I sensed the hidden anxiety underneath. "Yes," I nodded. "We can't just ignore it." We walked in silence for a while, and I didn't know how to find the right words. Inside me, conflicting feelings battled, desire and fear. "It shouldn't have happened," Jack finally said, stopping and turning to me. "We have to keep our distance, like brother and sister." "I agree," I answered, trying to convince myself it was true. "It was just a moment of weakness." He nodded, and I saw a flicker of relief in his eyes. We both understood that we had to try to return to our previous relationship, although it seemed almost impossible. We promised each other to keep our distance and behave as we had before. But I knew it would be difficult. A line had been crossed between us, and it was impossible to pretend that nothing had happened. But we tried. We returned to the others and rejoined the game, doing everything we could to act like brother and sister. But I felt that something had changed forever. Despite our promise to keep our distance, Jack and I still found ways to be alone together. It seemed as if fate itself was pulling us toward each other like a magnet. I couldn't explain why, but I constantly wanted to be near him. Everything we told each other about going back to the way things were began to feel like a lie. Our secret meetings became something inevitable. We found hidden spots in the hotel where we could talk, where no one would see us. One night, after our parents had gone to sleep, we climbed up to the hotel roof. The sky was filled with stars, and it was so quiet, with only the soft rustling of leaves in the breeze. "Look how beautiful it is," Jack whispered, looking up at the sky. I nodded, feeling my heart start to beat faster. We sat close, too close, and I couldn't stop thinking about how his shoulder barely touched mine. It was as if an invisible energy flowed between us, pulling us closer together. I don't know what to do with what I'm feeling," Jack finally said, his voice quiet, almost inaudible. "It's too strong." I felt a tightening inside me at his words. They were the truth for me, too. I was afraid to admit, even to myself, how strong my attraction to him had become. But I knew I had a boyfriend, and the thought of him only added to my guilt. I shouldn't have allowed myself to feel anything like this for Jack, but every time we were alone, it became harder to resist. "Me too," I whispered, unable to lift my gaze. "But I have a boyfriend." Jack froze for a moment, but then his expression grew even more determined. "I know," he said softly, "but you can't deny what you're feeling right now, just like I can't." Our conversations grew more candid. We began to share what we felt, unafraid of judgment. It was a strange feeling, to speak so openly, like never before. We realized that the attraction between us was much stronger than we had imagined, and every time we met, it became harder to ignore these feelings. And one night, when we met on the roof again, Jack suddenly stopped, looked me straight in the eyes, and said, "I can't hold back anymore." I didn't have time to reply. His lips found mine, and I felt everything inside me turn upside down. This kiss was not just a kiss. It was an admission that we could no longer ignore our emotions. My arms wrapped around his neck, and I felt his body press against mine. We kissed as if it were inevitable. And at that moment, I realized that we had crossed the line from which there was no return. Everything we had said about keeping our distance and my boyfriend lost its meaning. Our feelings were much stronger than us, and we could no longer hold them back. I was sitting on the edge of the bed, talking on the phone with my boyfriend. His voice was calm and familiar, but at that moment, I could barely focus on his words. My mind was filled with thoughts of Jack, who was in the same room. I tried to appear confident, as if nothing unusual was happening, but inside, everything was boiling. "Yes, everything is fine," I said into the phone, feeling my heart beat faster. "Just a bit tired. We've been walking a lot today." Jack, who had been lying on his bed, suddenly got up and came closer. I gave him a quick glance, trying to figure out what he was up to. He stopped nearby, and a mischievous spark appeared in his eyes. I pretended not to notice him, continuing my conversation with my boyfriend, but the tension grew with every second. Suddenly, Jack, with a playful smile on his lips, gently tugged at my legs. I flinched slightly, but tried not to show my emotions. He lifted my legs higher so that I was almost lying on my back and began softly kissing my neck. My breathing became heavy, and I tried to keep calm, but it was becoming harder to control myself. "Yes, I hear you," I said into the phone, trying to keep my voice steady. "Maybe we should talk later." Jack continued, and I felt his lips gently touch my skin, leaving light yet deep kisses. Each touch made me forget everything but this moment. I knew I had to stop, had to be restrained, but my feelings were overpowering me. "I need to go," I quickly added into the phone, feeling my voice betray me with a slight tremble. "Talk to you tomorrow." I hung up the phone and set it aside, unable to pretend any longer. Jack, sensing my hesitation, intensified his caresses, his kisses becoming deeper and more passionate. My body responded to his movements instinctively, and I could no longer ignore it. We gave in to our passion once again, our bodies entwined in an embrace, and I felt everything inside me burn with desire. But deep down, I knew this was a dangerous game. We were at risk of being caught, of losing everything. But at that moment, we didn't care. Every time Jack touched me, I felt all my principles and boundaries fade away. We knew we had gone too far, but we couldn't stop. Our emotions had taken over, and I couldn't think of anything else but this moment. The next morning, Jack and I made a decision. We didn't say it out loud, but it was clear. We needed to try to return to our previous relationship, like brother and sister. Too much had already happened, but we both knew that things couldn't go on like this. We had to stop before it went too far. Trying to stick to this decision, we started spending more time with our parents. Instead of finding ways to be alone, we did everything possible to stay in their company. I tried to appear relaxed, laugh at their jokes, and participate in conversations. But even when we were all together, the tension between Jack and me was almost tangible. Jack was trying too. I could see him holding himself back, trying to be the same big brother he had been before. But every time our eyes met, I saw in his gaze the same thing I felt: desire mixed with growing despair. Every interaction between us was filled with hidden tension. Even the simplest touches, when he accidentally brushed my hand or shoulder, created an electric charge. We both tried to ignore it, but our bodies seemed to defy our decisions. One evening, in particular, stood out to me. We went to dinner at the hotel restaurant. Mom was in a great mood, telling a story from her childhood, and everyone was laughing. But for me, it was the most torturous dinner of my life. I could feel Jack watching me, even when he pretended to listen to Mom. His gaze seemed to burn right through me, and I had to make a great effort not to look back. I tried to act naturally, but inside, everything was on fire. The moment our legs accidentally touched under the table, I flinched, and the hidden tension between us became almost unbearable. I glanced at Jack and saw he was struggling with the same emotions. We both realized that despite all our efforts, our feelings were only growing stronger. Our parents suspected nothing. They continued to enjoy their vacation, oblivious to the silent struggle between us. But I knew this couldn't go on much longer. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was back to normal. Something had changed forever, and no matter how hard we tried, we could no longer go back. That evening, when dinner ended and we returned to our rooms, I felt overwhelmed and confused. I didn't know how to handle this feeling. Jack glanced at me before closing the door to his room, and in his eyes, I saw the same conflict that was in mine. We both understood that trying to return to the past was much harder than we thought, and our feelings were only getting stronger. Despite all our efforts to return to the way things were, resisting the temptation was impossible. Jack and I continued to find ways to be alone, as if we were drawn together by some invisible force. It had become a kind of game, one we played in secret. Each meeting under the cover of night or quiet whispers on the beach added a sense of danger and excitement. Our nightly encounters became more frequent. We would sneak out of our rooms when everyone at the hotel was already asleep, meeting in hidden corners, on the roof, in the garden, on the beach, where only the sound of the waves could be heard. We walked along the shore, barefoot, our steps sinking into the sand, and the moonlight cast our silhouettes. These moments were our little secrets that no one could take away from us. I felt Jack becoming more insistent. He began to show me more signs of attention, gentle touches, light caresses of the hand, smiles filled with hidden meanings. With each meeting, his movements grew bolder, and I couldn't help but respond. In his touch, I found something I had been missing. Every touch of his seemed to awaken feelings in me that had long lain dormant. We started working out together, running in the mornings, playing tennis, swimming in the sea. Every time we touched during a game or a casual collision, I felt this spark, this invisible connection between us. Every time he put his hand on my back or helped me up, I felt his presence throughout my body. And with each time, these feelings grew stronger. I knew the situation was becoming more risky. We were spending too much time together, and I feared someone might notice, might suspect something. But that only added a sharpness to our meetings. The passion between us was growing, and I felt I had less and less control over myself. One night, when we met on the beach again, Jack came closer to me than usual. He looked into my eyes, and I saw something new there, something deeper than just desire. It was at that moment I realized we had gone too far. "We're taking risks," I whispered, feeling a shiver run through my body. "We can't keep doing this." Jack nodded, but his eyes remained firm and determined. "I know," he said quietly, "but I can't stop. I can't pretend anymore." His words echoed my own thoughts. I couldn't stop either. Every day, every minute, I understood more and more that my feelings for Jack were beyond reason. But in that moment, it seemed like the only right thing to do. That day, we went for a family walk in the forest. Mom decided it would be good for all of us to spend time in the fresh air, away from the noisy hotel and its bustle. Jack and I tried to keep our distance from each other to avoid drawing any unwanted attention from our parents, but I could still feel his presence every time I looked in his direction. The tension between us was undeniable, even when we weren't speaking. As we walked along the path, the sunlight filtered through the leaves, creating delicate patterns on the ground. The birds sang above us, filling the air with their melodies, and everything seemed calm and serene. But inside me, there was a storm brewing. Every time Jack's hand brushed against mine, even by accident, I felt a rush of heat and electricity. "Emily, come here, look at this," Jack called to me, pointing toward a small clearing hidden behind the trees. I hesitated for a moment, glancing at our parents, but curiosity got the best of me. I walked over to where he stood, and before I knew it, he took my hand, pulling me behind a thick cluster of trees. We were out of sight, completely hidden from anyone who might pass by. I felt my heart begin to race, my pulse quickening as Jack turned to face me. His expression was intense, filled with an emotion I couldn't quite place. But I knew what he wanted, what we both wanted. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, to stop this before it went too far. But the words died on my lips. Jack moved closer, his hand reaching up to gently cup my face. His touch sent a shiver down my spine, and before I could think, his lips were on mine. The kiss was full of urgency, of desire that we had both tried so hard to suppress. I felt his arms wrap around me, pulling me closer, and I couldn't help but melt into his embrace. For a moment, the world around us disappeared. Nothing mattered except for the feeling of his lips against mine, the warmth of his body pressed close. But then, all too quickly, reality came crashing back. "Emily! Jack!" I heard my mother's voice, sharp and filled with shock. We pulled apart instantly, my heart pounding in my chest. Mom stood there, her face a mix of confusion and horror, with her camera still in her hand, poised to take a photo. "What are you doing?" she demanded, her voice trembling. "Emily, come here right now." She grabbed my arm and pulled me away from Jack, not giving us a chance to explain or say anything. I could feel my cheeks burning with shame, tears welling up in my eyes as I looked back at Jack, who stood frozen, his face pale. Mom dragged me back to the main path, her grip tight on my arm. She called out for Dad, and soon He appeared, concern etched on his face. "What happened?" he asked, looking from Mom to me and then to Jack, who was slowly following us back. Mom didn't answer immediately. She just shook her head, clearly too shocked to find the right words. She finally managed to say, "We need to talk. Now." When we returned to the hotel, my parents immediately went into their room, leaving Jack and me standing in the hallway, separated by the thick, tense air between us. I felt my whole body trembling, my mind spinning with thoughts of what would happen next. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Dad came out, his expression stern and serious. "We've decided," he began, his voice steady, "that the two of you need to be separated. Emily, you'll go back home with your mother tomorrow, and Jack will stay here with me." I felt a wave of panic rise in my chest. "But, Dad, please," I started, my voice breaking. "No arguments, Emily," he cut me off sharply. "This is for the best. Whatever this is, it has to stop before it ruins our family." I looked at Jack, and for a moment, I saw the same panic and pain reflected in his eyes. We both knew that our parents' decision was final, and there would be no way to convince them otherwise. In that instant, I realized everything had changed, and there was no turning back. After Mom caught us kissing in the woods, she was horrified. She immediately took me home, not allowing us any chance to explain or discuss what had happened with Jack. Our parents were stunned and unsure how to handle the situation. In the days that followed, they made the painful decision to separate us, believing it was the only way to prevent further complications. They decided to send Jack and me to different cities for our studies. It was their way of cutting off our contact and keeping us apart. The decision was made with a heavy heart, but they were convinced it was necessary to preserve the integrity of our family. I felt a profound sense of emptiness as I packed my things and prepared to leave. The separation was both a relief and a deep sorrow. I understood that this drastic measure was meant to protect our family from any further turmoil. Still, the thought of being away from Jack left me with a gnawing sadness. The days were filled with a somber quiet as I adjusted to the reality of our separation. Jack, on the other hand, struggled deeply with the distance between us. The separation was not only painful, but also bewildering. He sought ways to maintain some form of connection, often reaching out with messages and letters, trying to bridge the gap that had been forced between us. His determination to stay in touch was a testament to the strength of his feelings, but the physical distance made it increasingly difficult to hold on to what we once had. Our lives had taken unexpected turns, and the separation was a harsh reminder of the consequences of our actions. We both faced our new realities with a mix of resignation and hope, hoping that one day the wounds would heal, and we might find a way to rebuild what had been lost. Despite the separation, Jack and I found ways to stay connected. We began writing each other secret letters, hiding them in places only we knew about. The thrill of our covert communication added a new layer of excitement to our already complicated relationship. Each letter was a lifeline, a way to bridge the gap between us and keep our bond alive. At night, when everyone else was asleep, we would have our calls. These conversations were our escape, a way to feel close despite the distance. We spoke of our feelings, our dreams, and our fears. Each word we exchanged seemed to deepen our connection, making the physical separation feel even more unbearable. Our feelings, intensified by the distance, grew stronger with each passing day. We started to make plans for the future, envisioning ways we could overcome the obstacles set by our families. Despite the prohibitions and the risk of being caught, we both knew that our connection was something too powerful to ignore. The future seemed uncertain, but our commitment to each other only grew firmer. Determined to be with Jack, I secretly traveled to the city where he was studying. The thought of seeing him again filled me with both excitement and anxiety. I wanted to spend time with him and discuss our future, no matter the risks. We arranged to meet at a secluded spot in a park, far from prying eyes. The night was cool and quiet, with only the distant hum of city life breaking the silence. When I saw Jack waiting for me, my heart skipped a beat. We embraced, feeling the warmth of each other's presence after so many weeks apart. We spent the entire night together, wrapped in a blanket of our own making, discussing our feelings and the challenges we faced. We talked about the increasing difficulties posed by our family's restrictions and their disapproval. Jack expressed his frustration and confusion, and I mirrored his emotions. We felt the weight of our predicament pressing down on us. Our discussions grew more intense as we tried to come to terms with the reality of our situation. The love we had for each other was undeniable, but so was the fear of the consequences we faced. As the night wore on, we found ourselves wrapped in each other's arms, comforted by our closeness, but also feeling the burden of our secrets. We knew that despite the strength of our feelings, we had no clear path forward. The challenges seemed insurmountable, and we were left grappling with the harsh reality of our situation, unsure of how to proceed. Over time, I realized that continuing to live in secrecy and suffering was no longer sustainable. Our love, though strong, had brought too many complications and heartaches. I understood that I needed to focus on my studies and take a break from communicating with Jack. It was a difficult decision, but I knew it was necessary for me to sort out my feelings and find my place in life. I wrote Jack a letter explaining my decision. I asked him to understand that this temporary break in our communication was needed for us to reflect on our feelings and concentrate on our individual paths. I assured him that this was not an end, but a necessary pause for our personal growth and stability. Jack received the letter with a heavy heart. He felt the distance and silence as a painful reminder of what we had and what we were giving up. Although he was deeply troubled by the separation, he understood that it was necessary for both of us to move forward. Our future remained uncertain, leaving the final chapter of our forbidden love open to interpretation.